Did you hear that Jason Benson will be in town for the fourth time? My friend Jeff asked. It won't be for long, but the city fathers decided to make him the Grand Marshal of the parade. Mayor Kane did it last year and will probably do it again next year. What could be more American than a war hero in the Independence Day Honor Parade? No, Jeff, I haven't heard that, I replied quietly. He must be pretty high up the military ladder by now. Years ago, he was a captain. He's a colonel, and he'll have to go even higher soon, Jeff agreed. He was wounded in Baghdad a year ago and has all kinds of medals and awards. Look, in time he'll be running the Pentagon. I pondered Jeff's news for a minute. Jason Benson was our town's version of Jack Armstrong, the real American boy. He played quarterback on the high school soccer team and shortstop in baseball. He graduated first in his class, and Division I universities competed for him. He was assigned to West Point and graduated near the top of his class there and played soccer and baseball. It was all very good for him. He was an accomplished, extremely capable athlete, soldier, and citizen. I had to recognize that. There were many things about him that were not in me. Normally, it wouldn't have mattered much to me. If it had been anyone else, I would have been genuinely pleased with his success. You've probably guessed my problem. He dated Sarah, who was now my wife, when they were in middle school. Back then, everyone seemed to feel that Sarah was his perfect match. She was also an amazing athlete, the salutatorian of her class, right behind Jason, and the prettiest girl Williamsport had ever seen. Somehow they broke up after Jason went to West Point and Sarah went to Temple. They never got back together. I was 2 years ahead of them in school. I wasn't a class genius, but I did well. I studied engineering at a state school. As computers became more and more a part of my daily life, I became more and more drawn to programming. I worked for several companies before I had the courage to start my own. I still don't know how I managed to convince Sarah to marry me, but I did. It was the greatest accomplishment of my life, or at least the best thing I'd ever done on my own. Our 2 daughters were a combined effort and a source of immense pride for both of us. Sarah never talked much about Jason. She knew I didn't like that part of her life. Invariably well-meaning people would mention his name from time to time. I was always surprised that these people seemed to think I should admire and idolize Jason and acknowledge how great it would be if he and Sarah were together. It was like I had no feelings or value when it came to Jason. No one seemed to doubt that Sarah would have been much better off if she had been able to keep Jason. To their credit, Sarah's parents never suggested anything even remotely similar to this scenario. I'd even seen Sarah's mother get quite angry at a family picnic years ago when a cousin hinted that Sarah should have married Jason. "Only a fool would say something so hurtful and ignorant," she rebuked her stunned cousin in front of the suddenly silent assembly. "If you knew what a wonderful husband and father Greg is, you would never have made such a stupid statement." Sarah smiled at her mother's sudden outburst of anger and squeezed my hand under the table. Sarah had always treated me with love and respect and never acknowledged any hint that I wasn't the best husband she could find. So what was my problem? It was the long shadow of Jason Benson, the hero and generally great guy. It seemed I was always being compared to him and found lagging behind, both in my mind and in the minds of the maddened crowd. My conversation with Jeff ended when my daughter April stole a basketball from the other team's defender and outran everyone. Both of my daughters played basketball in summer league. April was so darn fast and aggressive. The girls who played on the other team really didn't want to play against her. I only saw one girl who could successfully get a basketball past her, and that was my oldest daughter, June. June was long-legged and moved with an easy grace that made her appear relaxed when she played. She was going to attend Temple in the fall on a volleyball scholarship. It could have been basketball, but she preferred volleyball. April was a junior in high school and was the main cog on a basketball team that hoped to win district and make it to states. I never got tired of watching my daughters play sports. They were good at every sport. They always gave it their all. That's exactly how competitive sports are meant to be. Combined with the speed and athleticism they inherited from Sarah, they were simply the best. June recently became the best in her class. This really helped the coaches make the decision to award her a scholarship. April was fighting for top honors in her class. I made my way out of the bleachers when the game was over. The girls were shaking hands and hugging their opponents. I waited for them before heading to the parking lot. "Not a bad game, right, Dad?" June grinned. April didn't even let them run the ball past half court. Finally, the coach asked her to give the defenders a break and back off a little. "Yeah, she sounded just like you, Dad. She said we weren't just playing for fun, we were playing to win. She didn't want us to destroy the other team's morale by crushing them too hard." April grinned. June almost stopped shooting after the first half to give them a chance to get into the game, and she was the top scorer. "Well, girls, summer league should be a good time for all the kids. When we started, we discussed what the goals would be and decided to promote sportsmanship and team play," I recalled. "Coach Simons did a great job today." "You always try to make everyone happy, Dad, except when you're playing against us. You never let April or me go when we play at home," June remarked. "That's because you're both mentally and physically tough. I wanted you to learn to never give up and play as hard as you can. In high school league games, no one takes you lightly, do they?" I asked. "You have to know what kind of competition you are in and play accordingly. Do you think I would be successful in business if I didn't let my clients win at golf most of the time?" "It's very difficult, Dad. It might help when you lose to your clients, but June can kick your ass at golf. I don't think you're going to let them win." April laughed. "You're not the world's best golfer." "Anyway, young lady," I exhorted April, "I know enough to look like I'm trying my best, and I'm gracious when I lose. That's the secret to winning in the golf course business." "It's a good thing you explained that to June, Dad, because she'll kick ass and lose business all over the place. She's doing the opposite of that. She looks like she's not even trying, and she's playing great," April bragged to her sister. "She needs to watch you up close to learn some of your moves." We turned into the driveway, so I didn't even try to think of an appropriate response. I could always coach and teach kids sports better than when I played with them. Sarah was a natural athlete, and the girls inherited that from her. I was the one who had to learn every trick of every game to try to compete. Sarah moved in following us. The girls started telling her about their day and how their game went. Following them into the house, I shook my head in amazement. How had I managed to get 3 such incredible women in my life? Sarah was a big shot at a local hotel and conference center that was part of a large chain. She started working there after getting her degree in hotel management. Her parents wanted her to become a lawyer, but Sarah knew what she wanted and went for it. Like everything else she tried, she was very good at it. 2 years ago, she'd reached the top and had even recently turned down a promotion that would have required her to move to Kansas. "Was there anything special today, Sarah?" I asked. "You looked a little more dressed up than usual, and you had to stay late. Did the big guys from corporate come to town for the holiday?" "No, but you're really observant, Greg," Sarah admitted. "The day after tomorrow is the 4th, and we always sponsor the Grand Marshal's expedition. This year, the paper wanted to print some pictures before the parade." Why did I suddenly get a stomach ache? I realized that it was what Sarah hadn't said that gave me cause for concern. "Sarah, was our golden boy and war hero there for the pictures? You seem to have forgotten to mention that he would be in town and also be the Grand Marshal in the parade. Is there any chance he will be filmed with you?" I inquired. Sarah played with her hands and looked to see if there were any girls in the room. She rarely showed nervousness, so that caught my attention. Jason was there, Greg was there. Our hotel donated a suite for our local military hero. It's just good public relations. His parents moved out of Williamsport a few years ago. He had no place to stay. We decided to donate the suite to a local man who was wounded in service to our country and is serving as Grand Marshal in the 4th of July parade, Sarah reasoned, raising her voice slightly. "It's just good business, and there's no reason to worry about it." "Then why are you so worried about it?" I answered immediately. "I'm not. Well, maybe a little," Sarah conceded. "It's just that we've always tried to avoid the subject of Jason. I know how you feel about the fact that we dated in high school, and how annoying it is when people, even after all these years, keep throwing his name around to you and me. This is strictly business, Greg. You're my husband and the only man I love or have ever loved. You have to believe that." "It's really nice to hear you say that, Sarah, and I want to believe you." The question that comes to mind is this. Why did you feel the need to keep information from me about Jason's return? I just told you that I knew it was a sore subject and I didn't want you to worry or get upset, Sarah reasoned. He just doesn't mean anything to me. Then I shouldn't have any reason to be upset, and you certainly shouldn't have any reason to keep any information from me, should you? I asked. Well, no, Greg, there really isn't. I'm glad we're all discussing this openly. Jason's ghost seems to have been hanging over us ever since we got married. Or longer, I added. So, are there any other events planned for Marshall? Colonel Benson will be the commander-in-chief at the parade, and the next day at an informal reception at the hotel, Sarah admitted. The hotel will provide hors d'oeuvres and drinks, and people will have a chance to ingratiate themselves with him. I assume you'll be the hostess of that ingratiation? I asked. Yes, Greg, I'm the caretaker at the hotel. It's part of my job. If anyone is going to reap the benefits of goodwill and pressure, it's bloody me, Sarah declared. Do you have a problem with that? I don't think it matters, Sarah. The lot has been cast and the plans have been made. I wasn't privy to them, but I'll survive as long as what you're telling me is true. He doesn't mean anything to you, does he? You're not going to stare at him like a gentle doe, are you? Sarah showed obvious signs of annoyance at my statement until she caught my little pun. Then she broke out into a smile and hugged me. Greg, I love you so much. You're the only male that has ever attracted the gaze of this doe or any other part of her body, she laughed. I hope that applies to everything and not just your eyes, Sarah, and also to anything that might be one of a kind, I smiled. You know that's all I have, sweetheart, Sarah cooed. It's all unique and it's all yours. As we made our way through the living room, we explained to the girls that we were too tired to eat and were going to bed. They would have to make do with what was left of last night's roast beef. Too tired? Laughed June. Then we'd better plug our ears. Last time you were this tired, you kept us up half the night. Oh, dear. Sarah blushed as I closed our bedroom door. Maybe we should wait until the girls are asleep. We don't want them to think we're doing this. They already know we're doing it, as you put it, Sarah, I remarked, freeing her breasts from her low top and nibbling on them. They think we're in love. Well, we don't mislead them, Sarah sighed, undoing the buttons on my shirt. The next night, I nonchalantly asked Sarah how her day had gone while she made dinner. She knew I was really asking about Jason and whether anything had happened between them. It went well, Greg. Jason has become even more determined and energetic than he was in high school. I think being an officer and going to war has honed his natural leadership skills, Sarah replied. Sarah, let's get something straight right now, I replied quickly. When I told you that I expected you to be open and honest about Jason, I sure as hell didn't mean that you were going to tell me what an incredible guy he is. I want an honest opinion about what a pompous ass he is and how glad you are that you married me. That's the kind of honesty I'm looking for here. Greg, this guy may be an Army Ranger and a war hero, all tanned and lean and tougher than an old piece of rawhide, but he can't compare to you. That's more like it. Tell me more, I asked. Sure, the President of the United States called Jason this afternoon, congratulating him and thanking him for his meritorious service. But 2 years ago, you were vice president of the Elks Club. Jason isn't even a member of the club, Sarah declared with a nonchalant face. I see, I nodded. The damn guy probably thinks he's too good for the club. He'll never reach the status of treasurer of a soccer club, of course. What a fucking loser. That's exactly what I was thinking, darling, Sarah agreed. He'll probably screw up his Fox News interview tomorrow after the parade, too. The book he's working on is going to be boring as hell. There's a good chance he won't be a general until he's 50. That's what I'm talking about, I almost shouted. That's a real acid test. There should be medals for that. Anyone can get shot in the ass. I gotta admit, Greg, it really helps when we tell the truth and discuss things like adults, Sarah laughed. No guy compares to my boyfriend. I grabbed Sarah, pulled her to my chest, and hugged her tightly. When she raised her head to look at me, I firmly covered her lips with mine. Why don't you two get a room? April moaned, walking in. This is the kitchen where my food is prepared. Sarah blushed and tried to move away from me, but I didn't let go. She took a quick glance at me. I gave her another kiss. "Daddy, you really love Mom, don't you?" April grinned. "Do you think I'll ever find a guy like you who can love me like that?" "Not until you're out of college," I exclaimed. "I think you're going to have a problem fighting them off." Sarah awed, and April blushed. I felt myself blushing, turned around, and headed towards the garage. I suddenly remembered that the backyard needed to be mowed. Raising daughters isn't always easy. The parade was a great success, and the cable news stations covered it with camera crews. Colonel Benson was a man on the rise. He epitomized everything the media was looking for on Independence Day. I watched his interview later that evening and had to admit that he spoke well, looked great, and made a man proud to be an American. The day after the parade was hectic. Sarah had left early to make sure everything was perfect for the open house they were throwing for Benson. The fact that one of the cable news crews was staying the night at her hotel didn't reassure her too much. If her hotel was going to be in the news, it better look perfect. I decided to show Sarah that I really appreciate her and all she does for me and the girls. I stopped by Jeff's at his jewelry store. I listened to a few suggestions and settled on a pair of diamond earrings. Jeff tried to talk me into buying the same necklace, but I was already over budget. I wandered around the main conference room watching the colonel. He was gracious and humble. I had to give him credit for that. He was really making a good impression on the people of his hometown. The fact that everyone in town already believed his shit didn't stink didn't interfere with his ability to please. Sarah was overseeing everything and doing a great job. It was a well-managed affair and the hotel looked good locally. It was all supposed to be over by 6, but at 7:30 there were still a few acolytes and devotees who didn't want to leave until the free food and drink was over. I knew it would be over soon, so I slipped into Sarah's office. I decided to surprise her with the earrings and then invite her to a neighbor's party after lunch where she could show them off to her friends. I had been waiting for Sarah for 15 minutes when I decided to use her bathroom. I had just finished washing my hands when I heard the study door close. I felt my wide smile evaporate when I realized a male voice was speaking. I hadn't closed the bathroom door completely, and it was easy to follow the conversation. "Sarah, I know I keep saying this, but you look amazing. Just being around you drives me crazy. You're still the most beautiful woman I've ever made love to." My stomach twisted, and I felt droplets of sweat on my forehead. I felt weak and had to lean on the sink to keep from falling. "That's very flattering, Colonel, but I must ask you not to talk to me like that. I'm happily married, and I don't want to give the wrong impression," Sarah replied. "That was over 20 years ago, and it's best forgotten." "Sarah, I know you still feel something for me. I've seen it the last few days while we've been working together, and please call me Jason," the sleek bastard hero replied. "The only reason I agreed to spend my vacation here is to see you again. I have to say it was well worth it. I'm sure you wanted the people in your old hometown to have the pleasure of seeing you here in the parade, Jason. You are a hometown boy who did well. Everyone is very proud of your adventures and successes. After all, you are a true war hero," Sarah concluded. "Sarah, come up to me now," Benson begged. "I must leave early tomorrow morning. Come and let me make love to you again. It will be a special way of thanking me for all I've done for the country and for you, really." I almost threw up. If I started throwing up, Sarah would realize I was eavesdropping on the conversation. I reminded myself to take slow, deep breaths and managed to regain control of my stomach. "I'm married, Jason. My husband would suspect something right away," Sarah reasoned. "He'd be upset, to say the least." "I've seen him hanging around, Sarah. He's not the type to cause trouble. I've had hundreds like him under my command. They never challenge me. He won't dare say anything to you," Benson reasoned. "Coaching girls soccer and changing diapers doesn't prepare a man for battle." I could hear the contempt in Benson's voice as he chuckled at his own remark. He didn't seem to have much respect for me. "Jason, why don't you stay a few more days if you want to see me more often?" my devoted wife asked. "I can keep your room hassle-free and free." "I can't, Sarah. I have orders to report to Washington tomorrow. It's all part of climbing the corporate ladder. I've put more than 20 years and a lot of blood into this case, and I'm getting close to it. I sure don't want to mess it up at this point." "Is it true that you Rangers have a thing about not leaving a comrade behind, Jason?" Sarah asked with too much enthusiasm to satisfy me. "That's absolutely right, Sarah. We take an oath and live by it. Without that trust and the knowledge that our brothers have our backs, we could never survive, Jason answered with obvious pride. Let's go to my room, Sarah. You have a chance to have a real hero make love to you tonight. That's very tempting, Jason, Sarah replied. It's just that there are a few things I don't quite understand. Why don't you explain them to me first? Of course, Sarah, Jason replied quickly. I'd be happy to explain everything so we can get on to Sweet Night. Well, Jason, let's start with this. What makes you think you're so much better than my husband? I know you've trained, gone to war, and been decorated many times. Do heroes have to have medals and badges to be a hero? I don't think I understand the question, Benson answered slowly. Your husband never risked his life. He never went to war. He hid behind your skirts, coached girls' soccer, and went to parent-teacher conferences. He really didn't do anything very brave. Greg led the soccer team our daughters played on when the coach broke his hip in a car accident and no one else wanted to. He didn't even know the rules, Sarah continued. He studied books and read things on the internet to do it. He had a hard time and made a few mistakes, but he kept the team together. He did it for our daughters and the other girls on the team. Greg helped take care of my dad after his stroke so my mom could get some rest. He was never particularly close to my dad, but willingly bathed and fed him. What's the reason? Because he loves me. He's my hero, Jason, Sarah declared. I'm sure he's a good guy, Sarah. I didn't mean to humiliate him. It's just that after what I've done all these years, it's hard to have too much respect for men who don't do what I do, Benson replied. That's not a satisfactory answer, Jason. Greg worked nights all year so he could attend the girls' events. He worked 2 jobs for the next year so we could save enough money for a down payment on our house. He caught our daughter June smoking in the garage with a couple of her friends when she was 16. He put her on his lap in front of them and gave her a good spanking. She cried, said she hated him, and ran off to her room. He stayed up all night so worried about her. The next day she apologized and promised never to smoke again. Then she hugged him, Sarah recalled. That's how a man raises his family, Jason. My next question is this. How could you ask me to give up my vows? You're so proud of your life and willing to risk it, but you had no problem asking me to break mine, Sarah said more than heatedly. You despise those who break their oaths, and then you ask me to break mine. Next, you tell me that you've invested so much time in your career, and you don't think I'm worth risking losing it, Sarah continued. What about my career and investments? You didn't think twice about asking me to risk losing my job and ruining my marriage while you bragged to me about your successes. Do you have such contempt for me and my life? Is it beneath your dignity? Didn't I spend 20 years building my life, my marriage, my career? She asked demandingly. When you put it that way, Sarah, I realize that I may have gone a little overboard. It's just that you're so beautiful, and you and I have such wonderful memories, Benson replied nervously. Those wonderful memories belong to you, not me, Jason, Sarah replied. I remember regretting not being able to give Greg the honor of being my first man. I remember how self-centered you were. I remember breathing a sigh of relief when you left for West Point and rarely came back to Williamsport. Those are my memories. Wow, I had no idea you felt that way, Sarah, Benson replied dryly. If you'll excuse me, I'll go. With those words, I heard the door open and close rather abruptly. I stayed in the bathroom, fearing that Sarah would come in and realize that I had heard the entire conversation. Fortunately, I heard the study door open and close again. She was gone. I waited until I was sure it was clear and headed to my car. I called Jeff as I walked across the parking lot. I was in the kitchen helping the girls make dinner. I was sitting there on pins and needles waiting impatiently when Sarah walked in. Sarah, I'm so glad you're home, I exclaimed, pulling her close to me. Greg, I was just finishing up some paperwork, Sarah explained. It's not like I wasn't doing anything. I pressed my lips to hers and pulled her tightly against my chest. My heart felt like it was about to burst. After a few minutes, I pulled my lips away from Sarah's. Wow, Daddy's really happy to see you, isn't he, Mom? June laughed. I hope my husband will greet me the same way after 20 years of marriage. Sarah looked at me intently. I could tell she was trying to determine exactly why I was so happy to see her and why I apparently didn't need any explanation for being late. June, I hope you find a husband like mine, Sarah agreed. He's full of surprises and loves his family very much. I pulled a small, beautifully wrapped package out of my desk drawer and held it out to Sarah. She took it gingerly from my hands and stared at it. Mom! Open it! April exclaimed. I want to see what it is! Sarah's hands seemed to shake as she pulled on the wrapper. She tossed the paper aside and took the box in her hands. Then she slowly opened it. 3 pairs of eyes began to water simultaneously. Oohs and ahs filled the room. The girls picked up the necklace, put it around Sarah's neck and clasped it. Each took care of her ear, and soon the earrings were in place. Then all 3 women turned to me. Daddy, are those tears? June asked.